Hey there, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here for the IWF Book Club. We are so thrilled that more than 200 of you have decided to join us today to discuss this month's book by Sarah Frey. I'm Carrie Sheffield, the Senior Fellow for the Independent Women's Forum, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Elizabeth Tu. For the next hour, we are going to discuss this terrific book and have a chance to talk with the author about the topics covered in this book. Now, before we bring the marvelous Sarah onto the stage to talk with us about her book, I'm going to explain a few things about how the virtual platform we're using is going to work. So we love for this to be an interactive conversation. We want you to make sure that you are going to ask questions, join the chat room, or even help us up here on the video to participate in the discussion later on. So first, we have a chat room on the right side of your screen where you can join the discussion with other attendees and my IWF teammates who will have a T next to their name. So keep an eye out for that little blue and white T. If you don't see the chat room, you can select the arrow in the top right corner to open the chat window. Second of all, next to the chat room tab, there is a questions tab. And if you have a question for Sarah, our wonderful author, please post it in the questions tab. You can give other attendees questions bumps if you like the question by hitting the up arrows. That will help us find those questions faster. We like the best questions. And lastly, toward the end of our time with Sarah today, we're going to be drawing and announcing names to win 3 copies of this amazing book, The Growing Season. We're so excited to give away 3 copies of this book. The rest of you, just make sure you get it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. In order to win, you must be present during the drawing at the end of today's event, and the books will be mailed to our door prize winners. So we should be all set. Elizabeth, I'll move it on to you.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, so now that we have all of that technical stuff out of the way and you guys know how to comment and how to chat with us today, it is time to introduce you to Sarah Frey herself. Sarah is the youngest of 21, and yes, you heard me correctly, 21 children. So that means she certainly knows what it means to struggle, both professionally and personally. But because of her hard work, her courage, and her entrepreneurial spirit, she also knows what it means to succeed as the head of a multi-state farming phenomenon. She's been dubbed the Pumpkin Queen, a very infamous moniker by the New York Times, because she's the largest grower of pumpkins in the United States. So if you have bought a pumpkin over the last several Halloween holidays, chances are it came from one of Sarah's farms. Her family business, Frey Farms, plants thousands of acres of fruits and vegetables across states in the South and the Midwest. And she will be the first to tell you, through a combination of hunting and gambling and help from very kind souls, her story is truly a tale of rags to riches. From starting a very small melon route before she could even legally drive so that she could help her family pay their bills, to walking into a Walmart distribution center, this one's my favorite, and becoming one of their largest distributors of its melons. Her book is full of inspirational advice of life, love, and business. And best of all, she continues to create opportunities for those living and working in rural communities to this very day. So without any further ado, we are very pleased to introduce to you Sarah Frey herself. Everyone extend a warm welcome as Sarah joins us up here on stage.
For that introduction, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone at the Independent Women's Forum for having me here today. I'm so happy to be with all of you. I'm watching all of the attendees from all of the different parts of the country. I saw Bozeman, Montana, Ithaca, New York, and so many places that I'm familiar with and that I've traveled to throughout my journey in building my business. And I'm just really excited to be here with all of you and look forward to, I hope it's very interactive, and I hope that the audience has a lot of questions today about the growing season.
Well, we look forward to talking to you as well. And I know our audience is already putting in several questions in that tab, and they are joining us from so many great places. So we're so excited to have you here, Sarah. I will tell you, your book was probably one of the easiest autobiography reads I have ever done. I just flew through it. You are so relatable, probably the most relatable CEO I have ever met. And your story was so inspiring. As I said in my intro of you, you know, your tale of survival and this tenacity, and I would maybe say a little bit of stubbornness to not back down from a fight is really just so inspiring. It takes a lot of ingenuity to make ends meet. And that's certainly something I think that a lot of people are experiencing, especially lately during this pandemic, you know, whether that's a career reinvention because they might have lost a job, or maybe they're looking for that second or third source of income, something that you yourself, from starting so many successful products and verticals, know all too well. So I would love for you to talk to anyone who might be watching right now who is going through something just like that, where, based on your experiences, what would you say to really encourage them to persevere, to keep going, and to fight to succeed at the end of the day?
Yeah, you know, Elizabeth, we've all been through an incredibly difficult time, you know, with the pandemic and everything, especially for women. We had our careers and then we had our family life, and we found that all of that sort of, you know, sort of got lumped into one bucket. I mean, I know I went from traveling and running my business and raising two boys to, okay, now I'm still doing all of those things, and I'm the teacher at home to these teenage boys, you know, or like, you know, algebra 2, mom, can you help? And so there was so much sort of layered on to all of us over the past, you know, year. And I just have to tell you, I really sort of view everything that we go through in life now as seasonal. And it's part of the reason that I named the book The Growing Season, because that's when I'm going through difficult times, I think of them as seasonal in nature. And even with COVID, it was something that, yes, it was scary. Yes, it impacted my business, my personal life, people that I loved. It impacted the whole world. But I was able to stay focused and actually look at the difficulties during COVID as potential opportunities. And for me, I found that that actually gave me more time with my kids. So it was like, no, this is a positive. I'm not traveling as much. I am with them more. We're having more dinners at home. Yeah, we're not, you know, we're not getting to go do some of the fun things that we used to do, but we're taking that time and we're redirecting those energies. And ultimately, I viewed, you know, that pretty difficult time as a gift, but then also a chance to really look under the hood and not just my life, but in my business as well. Because, you know, for us, we were greatly impacted because most of our food service business just died. Now, our grocery business was still very good. I mean, still, like, even throughout the pandemic, it was still the same number of mouths to feed. It was just, how do you, you know, how are people getting those products? So for me and my entire family, you know, at first it was incredibly scary to go through that. But then once we decided, hey, we're going to pivot and we're going to have to adjust to what's going on in the world, then, you know, very quickly we realized that there were also opportunities for the business within some of those really dark and difficult times. So I think the advice really that I would have for anyone now that we're sort of coming out on the other side of this is, you know, I'm sure everybody had plenty of time to think about their lives and, you know, where their personal lives were headed or where their careers were headed. We're going to reemerge from everything that we've been through a much stronger country, I believe, and much stronger as individuals because of what we learned during that time. And I would always encourage anyone who has a unique idea. I think that one of the things that sometimes holds women back when they have an idea, whether it's to start a new business or, to take a different path in their career or ask for a promotion at their job. The thing that sort of sometimes holds us back is really our own sort of insecurities. And also, we're sort of wired differently than men. So men think, yeah, I'm, of course I can do that, or of course I deserve that. Where women sometimes think, well, do I have the right qualifications? Am I good enough? Did I do the right things? Did I check all the boxes? Do I deserve this? And so I think the one piece of advice that I would leave everybody with today is, I think all bets are off at this point. If you want it, you just have to go for it, and don't overthink it, because men don't.
Sure. And during the pandemic too, as you were talking about, you and your family and your business and kind of taking a step back, I think a lot of us now looking back on it really tried to make lemonade out of that lemons, or maybe in your case, making melon babies out of small watermelons, which by the way is such a brilliant marketing tactic. And I think really speaks to your ingenuity, where you're going to make it work no matter what. You're going to make those ends meet, and you're going to make the lemonade out of the lemons.
Yeah, I think it's always possible. As long as you're looking for the good, you can always find good, even in the darkest of times. And that's one of the primary takeaways from the growing season. I mean, I share a lot of very personal and oftentimes very, very difficult stories to read in the book, but ultimately, through all of that, there is still good to be found. And I think that we all have good in our lives, no matter what we happen to be going through. It's just sometimes you have to look a little harder for it than others.
Amen. Amen, Sarah. So I want to ask you about, throughout your book, which is an amazing read. And again, I hope all our audience picks up a copy if you haven't today, because boy, your family, everything you went through, it's incredible. Your father faking his own death so he could escape from his 13 kids and not have to pay child support. I mean, I mean this in a loving way, but it's sort of like Jerry Springer in terms of the dysfunction and how you came out of it. And the woman you are today is so inspiring. And the book is really telling us how you did that all. And I think no matter what our audience is going through, they're going to get a lot out of your book. One thing that struck me as I was reading was what some people might call the imposter syndrome, where sometimes people feel like they don't belong, that, I'm an imposter. I don't deserve this level of success, as you were saying about women versus men. And at some points you talk about how you were ashamed to talk about your past, or felt that you didn't fit in when you're in these boardrooms or talking to, business people, or just, very polished, wealthy people from private schools. And you were ashamed that some people might judge you. And you also had people making assumptions about you, everything that you inherited your farm from your father, which you didn't. You saved the farm that your father was about to lose, or that you're just the wife of the real farm owner or the real businessman. How did you overcome just the internal pressure or mental obstacles as people were saying these things about you? So both the external pressure from others and then the internal pressure of your own, possible self-doubt.
Well, there's actually two sides to that. So on one side, it was actually very beneficial to me during sort of the early years of my career and starting my business. And that is that when people met me, they just assumed that I had inherited either the business, or I was, put in charge somehow. That was sort of easier for them to wrap their head around. And that in many ways made my life easier. So I let people have those assumptions, because if they assume that, then they were more likely to think, oh, okay, well, she's, she has it together. She, she, obviously clearly came from a great family, or, was put in charge by, her father, who must have been a really, great businessman, whatever it was. It was easier for me to allow others to have those types of perceptions as I was growing my business. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized that it was almost in a sense unfair to other women, younger women, to sort of let that narrative continue and not say, no, you know, this is actually really what happened, and this is actually how I started. And then on the other side of that, you know, I was able to, you know, sort of get through that, as you called it, Carrie, the imposter syndrome. Once I realized that that was all in my own head, like we're sort of our own, you know, we're our own greatest critics. And the things that I was concerned with wasn't necessarily things that anyone else would have been concerned with at the time. So if you think about it, I attended high school and college simultaneously when I was a teenager, while I was trying to, you know, build my business. That in and of itself, you know, is a huge accomplishment. But in my own mind, I thought, well, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, and I didn't continue on with my college education because I had started this business, and I'm not as educated as others. And you know, instead of thinking to myself, wow, you know what, I worked my butt off and I did really great, and I did go to college, you know, while I went to high school, and and you know, managed to build a multi-million-dollar business when I was a teenager. Instead of thinking to myself, wow, you did great and you're doing great, I was beating myself up over, you know, the silliness of, well, you didn't exactly go to Harvard, you know? And, you know, that was all sort of in my own head. And I think that that's something that we all kind of deal with at times, you know, when we wonder, are we good enough? Do we deserve it? You know, I had to just sort of reconcile that in my own mind to get over it. And, you know, for so many of us, we are our own worst critics. And once we can sort of quell that voice in our own heads, I think, you know, the possibilities at that point are limitless in what we can achieve.
Well, Sarah, as someone who actually did go to Harvard, I worked my butt off to get there too. I can tell you, sadly, it's a place of indoctrination that tells people actually they're a victim so often. And I want to bring in a quick question here from one of our viewers, Melissa Roth. She says, Sarah, one of the things I loved about the book was that you never played the victim despite your circumstances or other things that happened to you. How do we instill these values in our kids today when society loves victims?
You know, that's a really great question. I am, you know, raising two boys, and they're living a much different life than I had growing up. Not that I would ever want my children or anyone else's really to go through many of the things that I did, but I, throughout really sort of their early years, and now they're teenagers, they're 15 and 17, I had to constantly remind myself that although I wanted to give them a better life, I also wanted to allow them to have some failures along the way. So many times when it would have been very easy, when something was difficult for them, it would have been very easy for me to step in and handle it or just take care of it. I actually allowed them to have some failures and to figure out at an early age how to overcome those things, because I wanted them to learn how to do that on their own. And I also felt like if I did that at an early age, when they had failures as an adult, they would be able to handle it. So much of what we see now is that we've all sort of coddled our children to the point and taken care of things for them until they leave home. And then when they actually start having some real life adult type issues, challenges, and and many times some failures, they don't necessarily know how to handle it. And I think that there's sort of been a softening because of that. So not that I knew, 15 years ago that ultimately the outcome would be, having two very strong, independent young men that would be very different from many of their peers that went to that they're going to school with. It wasn't that I had it and just entirely figured out, but now I look back and I think, wow, I really did the right thing, because they don't, they don't have a sense of entitlement. They understand what it means to work very hard. They understand that, ultimately, they treat others with respect, and, respect is given to them, but they're sensitive children. They're good humans, but they're not overly sensitive to the point where they're, what I would call like a snowflake. They're young, really strong, confident men, and they've become strong, confident young men because I actually allowed them to have some failures. And at some point, I probably felt like I was being judged by other parents, like, oh wow, well, why would she let her kids go through that, or why would she do that? Like, well, now I sort of see the benefit of having raised them in the way in which I did.
It's often said that failure and mistakes can be one of the best teachers in life.
Yeah.
I know I agree with that. I think you do too.
Go ahead,
as
Elizabeth.
well. And one thing that I really love that you currently do is work to help other people working in rural communities.
Well, I
to be
don't know if Elizabeth has another
based-
question, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned with parenting your two teenage boys, how did you juggle this? So in addition to you being an amazing businesswoman, your sons, William and Luke, I can just imagine, women who are watching here today or aspiring, who are mothers already or aspiring mothers. What advice do you have for them? How did you juggle and balance everything that you have for running this multi-million-dollar empire, which, as you mentioned in your book, you've sold $1 billion worth of produce, which is amazing. How did you balance all of this in addition to raising your children? So do you believe in the concept of work-life balance, or do you think it's just really a series of putting out fires as they come along?
Yeah, I think it's different really for every woman. So in my life, because I had my own business, it was a very family-centric business. And I was, you know, by all means, like my own boss. I could take the kids with me when I traveled if I, chose to have them with me on a business trip. I was able to bring them in at a very early age into the business. I never sheltered them when I was having, difficult business conversations, either from my kitchen or my office. So in my life, the kids, it was like they were in the same bucket with my career, with the business, personal life. It was, they were being raised as part of it. So I never really felt like I lacked a balance, but from the outside looking in, it may have seemed like, oh, she doesn't have a balance. Look, she's going to Bentonville, Arkansas to meet with Walmart, and she has her two kids with her at the corporate office. Oh, it didn't look like that was balanced, but for me, it was. So it's different for everyone. So for me, it worked best to keep it all in one bucket, and we managed, quite well. I had a conversation with the boys about a year ago, and I asked them, I said, did you ever feel like like maybe you missed out on something? Because I was never the mom who was writing Will's name or Luke's name on their individual lunches. I don't know that I ever even packed them their own lunch. Like, I taught them very early when they were young how to make their own lunch. In fact, I taught them how to make my coffee. They were taking care of me at such an early age, more than I was ultimately taking care of them. But about a year ago, I had a conversation with them, and I said, did you feel like you missed out on anything? Like, was I there enough? I had one of these moments of guilt that we all have. And they were like, are you kidding, Mom? You've given us some of the most incredible experiences, that we could have ever imagined. They've traveled with me internationally. They've been able to do things that, most young adults or even adults, only dream of, or maybe only get to do once in their life. And for them, they have an appreciation of how they were raised. So maybe I didn't show up at maybe I bought the store-bought cupcakes and sent them to the bake sale, or, maybe I didn't show up at the, every single PTO meeting. And, but I was there for the things that mattered. And ultimately, I had to very early on sort of shed the guilt and not try to hold myself to some perfect mom standard that, believe me, does not exist. And I had to get over the feeling of feeling guilty when I was at work, when I felt like maybe I should have been with my kids. And when I was with my kids, maybe there was something that, many people within my company depended on that I should have been working on. So once I figured out that guilt was the biggest thing that sort of held all of us back, and once I was able to say, okay, I refuse, I'm not going to feel guilty no matter what I'm doing, then I felt balance in my otherwise unbalanced life.
Sure. Well, I know there are a lot of people watching right now, undoubtedly, who have gone through the exact same thing and who are learning that lesson. And I'm sure really helpful to hear you talk about it and your experience there too. I do want to go back to what I was asking you about earlier. So much of what you have learned, the trials that you have gone through, has really obviously molded and shaped you and your business. But now what I especially love is that you are working to help those who are living and working in rural communities to also grow their farms, grow their businesses. As someone who comes from a very rural community with farms all around me as I was growing up, friends whose families were farmers, I know just how important that is, because the struggle can certainly, depending on the season, can certainly be very difficult to overcome. So I would love to ask you how, using what you have learned from these trials, you are now applying it to help other farms succeed through any challenges they might be trying to overcome.
Yeah, I think that, so in our business, we not only grow our own fruits and vegetables that we take to market, we also work with other farms, much smaller farms now, farms the size of the farm that, the family farm that I bought and started out with, ultimately to get their products to market. And one of the ways that we've been successful in doing that is through volume type buying situations. So when you have the scale and when you have the leverage of being a larger organization, you're able to sort of pass those costs along to your grower partners. So that's one of the ways that we've been able within our own organization to make other partner farms that are much smaller in size in many rural communities across the country successful. I think it's a blessing, personally, to grow up in a rural community. When I was a little girl and I was growing up on that farm in Southern Illinois, which is closer to Kentucky than Chicago, I dreamed every day of my life of getting off of it. And everything that I was doing from a very early age was meant to propel me into a life that looked nothing like how I was raised. And what's really ironic is that that life that I was trying so hard to escape in that area of the country that I had dreamed of escaping is now ultimately the escape. It's the lifestyle that so many people think about and dream about. It's almost like a coveted lifestyle to be able, to live in a place where you have, freedom of space, nature, and ultimately the ability to grow your own food and to, I don't want to go so far as to say live off the grid, because I don't want to go that far back in time. But rural communities have so much to offer, and they've been overlooked for so long. and the talent. So there are a lot of, my children attend a public school in Southern Illinois. And I can tell you that there really isn't one set of parents at that school that I wouldn't let my kids go home with, that I wouldn't feel comfortable with, them being picked up, by so-and-so's mom and dad or whatever. And the kids that they go to school with, maybe they don't have the same opportunities, but there is something very special and something very unique about children that come out of these, that are raised and come out of these rural communities. And for my future, and one of the things that I'd like to focus on is, how do you cultivate that talent? How do you take that talent in rural communities and ultimately show these young people that not only that there are learning opportunities outside of where they grew up, but that they can take those skills and they don't have to leave the place that they are from, and they can apply the skills that they go out and learn back in their own communities. So for me, one of the visions that I have is that rural communities no longer become a place that young people want to escape, but a place where young people want to stay, put a stake in the ground, and build in those rural communities. It's just figuring out how we get that done.
Absolutely. That's very important. Before I go to our next question, and by the way, we're getting some really great questions in our tab. So I am going to ask an audience question next. And if you have one for Sarah and you've not already put it there, go ahead and do so. But I also want to remind you all that we are giving away 3 signed copies of Sarah's book, The Growing Season. So if you don't already have your hands on one, make sure you stick around to the end of this event, and we'll be announcing the winners very soon, but you have to stay with us if you want to win. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you an audience question. This one is from Nancy H. She wants to know how you think you'd be different if your dad hadn't encouraged you to be tough and resourceful as a young girl.
That's a really good question. And I think that when people read the book, it's like crazy, because they either love my dad or they hate my dad. And I think one of the biggest takeaways too is that it's okay to love really imperfect people. And so for me, with my parents, my whole situation, anyone really who's been involved in my life and shaping who I ultimately became, I look to the good and the things that I learned. So my father's encouragement had a great deal, in my opinion, to do with how I ultimately built my confidence. And confidence is one of the key characteristics of successful people. It can be very quiet confidence, but it wasn't. There were so many people who played a part in building my confidence at a very early age. I had 4 older brothers, and they all, in their own special way, in their own unique way, contributed to doing that. But I think just really in general, it was my upbringing, how I grew up, where I grew up, and then ultimately, taking the good from, a very difficult childhood and applying it to my future. So I don't know that there's really just one person to credit with that, so much as several people, and then the ultimate, holistic experience.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And one of the things you talk about in the book, the big discrepancy from the Hill, which is the name of your family farm, and how you were raised versus when you would leave the Hill, to see how girls and women were treated off the Hill versus on the Hill. That you said in the book that your mom only made you wash dishes once, and she took a picture of it because it was so novel. She tried to dress you up in girly clothes, and you would always say no. that the idea of girls not being able to do everything just never occurred to you, or to be treated differently didn't occur to you, except for you said that one night that you watched, your family was watching on that one channel you had on your little black and white TV about Geraldine Ferraro, who was the Democratic nominee for vice president. And your dad said, see, women can do everything. And you said, oh, that hit you as if it were saying, oh, the sky is blue. Of course, women could do everything.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious because, you've talked about, and we're a 501c3, so we don't do endorsements. We don't talk about, we don't endorse campaigns or anything, but just from a policy perspective, and women running for office, women run for office far less often than men. Why do you think that is? And then also, what do you think your skills that you've learned from business, how those might translate to the public sector and public service?
Carrie, that's it's great that you remember that part of the book that I wrote about, because that's one of the moments that I probably remembered most vividly. And when he pointed out the sort of how exceptional that was, that she was, on the television and that she was the nominee, I should have been like, oh, wow, that's really incredible. But you're right. Like, I wrote about it. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why is this special? Why do you feel the need to point this out to me? And I was actually very sad that night when I went to bed, because it dawned on me that outside of my own world and sort of this little kingdom, imaginary kingdom that I, had as a little girl, that women, it was unique that a woman was, considered for that. And I didn't, at that point, I didn't want to watch TV any longer. I'm like, don't show me anything else. I don't even want to watch TV anymore. I have considered at various times a future in politics. I think that women oftentimes are discouraged from running because they have a hard time talking about themselves, whereas it's easier for men to tout their accomplishments, and it's a little harder for women. And one of the things, either you're too much or you're not enough. Women are judged more harshly than men. Fair, is it fair? No, but other women are actually probably even harder judges than men at times. So it's not just, how are men judging me, but how are other women judging me at the same time? So I think that, I will say, I feel like we've made a ton of progress. And if you look at this last election cycle, I know that many more women were elected to Congress, not just on both sides, and on the Republican side as well. And I think that's really fantastic. And I think that there are a lot of really strong leaders in that freshman class. And I think we're going to continue to see more women make the decision that they're going to put themselves out there and that they're going to run. And ultimately, I think they make really good leaders. They're thoughtful. They think a little differently, and they bring a unique perspective to the job. And I think that ultimately we will see more of that and not less, and that's a good thing. And then as far as, personally with me, as or with anyone running a business, I'd like to see more people who have built businesses run for office, because there is nothing that can replace real world and real life experience. I don't care who you are, what you've done. If you've lived it and you've been through it, you're going to be a better leader when it comes to, business or whatever it may be. So I think one of the challenges for people, and I know this was a challenge for me when I was considering running, is that when you're still in the middle of it, and you're still running your business, it's really hard to think, wow, I'm going to step away from, what I've worked so hard to build and to go serve. So that's certainly a challenge in and of itself. But I would really like to see more entrepreneurs and business owners ultimately get involved and run for political office. I think it would be great for the country.
We have a lot of viewers in the chat right now who are very excited, Sarah, about your comments about women and how we are strong and we can do anything, and just your inspiring comments there. From your experiences, how do you think we can best empower women to lead like women? So not copying how men tend to lead, not falling into those stereotypes of doing it the way men do, but how can we take our qualities as women and use them in leadership positions as we grow our businesses to our ultimate benefit?
I think it's important to just ultimately be yourself. I mean, authenticity is authenticity. I mean, if you think about, some of the most successful people that some of the most likable people that they're just authentic people. They're real. And I think we tend to overthink, what exactly is going to come out of my mouth at any point in time. How do I look? Do I look good enough? And do I sound good enough? All of these different things. And I mean, for me, I think the people that I'm drawn most to are people who just kind of don't really, I shouldn't say don't care, because everyone wants to care, but they just are who they are, and they're kind and they're warm and they're authentic, and they actually they care, they want to make a difference. You can't manufacture that. That's not something that can be, you can't go to school for that. You can't go through a training program that says, okay, this is how you flash an authentic smile. No, it is what it is. So I think the focus really ultimately needs to be on just owning your own power and being yourself. That's going to get you further faster than trying to think about how do I fit into this perfect mold for this perfect position, whether I'm going to get into politics or start my own business or do this or do that. Just ultimately be yourself. Just own your own power and be yourself.
Sarah, that's amazing advice. And you are so authentic. Again, the book is called The Growing Season. She is so authentic in this book. She's so raw. She's so honest. It's an incredible read. We're so grateful that you joined us, Sarah Frey, today. And I know all our viewers here today are so grateful for you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you to all of the viewers and the guests that joined today. I really appreciate all of you.
All right.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
All right. Take care.
And book club members, don't forget that later in this discussion, we're going to be giving away 3 autographed copies of this puppy. You don't want to miss your chance. You have to be present to get your copy of this book.
That's right. We're going to be announcing the winners in just the next few minutes, actually. So make sure you stay tuned there. But now is the time where we get to hear from all of you. So many of you have been saying your fabulous questions for us in that questions tab. Carrie and I are going to be talking about some of them. If you would like to join us up here on stage, so that means we can see and we can hear you, we would love to have you. Go ahead and in that questions tab, type out your question that you'd like to discuss. And if you are willing to be brought up on stage, also include a V at the end of your question. That's going to tell our team that we can invite you to come up. And so we will wait for a few people to go ahead and start putting those V's by their names. And in the meantime, Carrie, I would love to talk to you about what your big takeaway was from Sarah's book. She had so much good advice, lots of inspiring stories in there. But if you had to really pinpoint one piece of advice that you felt was the overarching that you took away, what was that?
I would say, as she said, don't be afraid and be authentic. That was over and over. One of my favorite stories in the book is she said basically the peak of her courage was when she was about 7 years old, and her father made her go pick up this giant, enormous snap turtle off the road and put it in the back of the truck so the family could have dinner. And she was deathly afraid of this because it could chop her whole hand off. And her father
wouldn't be?
Yeah. But her father wouldn't let her feel sorry. She said she tried to pull the girly card and do a burst of tears. And she knew the results is if she didn't go do that, she'd have to go and do house chores with her mom, which she didn't want to do. But she said that was when she picked it up by the tail and threw it in the truck. She had no idea how she did it, but she said that was the peak of her courage. And everything's just been downhill since then. But I think that over and over, just the mental barriers, that's another big takeaway from what she said today too, is that inner dialogue that you have with yourself, the inner critic, just throwing that aside, taking risk. That was a big theme from the book. What about you?
I really loved her ingenuity, the making the lemonade out of lemons. And I brought this up when we were chatting with her, but her idea to make these melon babies. So for those of you who haven't read the book, Sarah had a season where the watermelon she was growing that season ended up being much too small for what is stereotypically what you would find in your grocery store. So she knew she was going to have a hard time getting distributors to actually buy these. She had this genius idea to brand them as melon babies. So miniature watermelons geared towards the woman who maybe doesn't have a big family, or maybe she's single herself and she wants a watermelon, but she doesn't want to buy this big honkin' like 7-9 pound watermelon just to eat herself. She'd prefer a small one. And really, there are so many more instances in her book of Sarah really just making lemonade out of the lemons, taking a really difficult time and turning it around and just fighting at all costs and never giving up. And that certainly, it inspired me as I was reading it. You know, I think a lot of us, especially lately, have been going through that very same thing, just the struggle to keep going, to keep fighting, and to see that bright side at the end of the day. So that was my biggest takeaway and what I really enjoyed. But all right, we do have a question that just came in. It actually applies to both of us. It's from Amber. She wants to know, Elizabeth and Carrie, give us an example of how you both related to Sarah in the book. So Carrie, you want to take this one on first?
Yeah, absolutely. I related in lots of different ways, including the fact that I have 4 older brothers. And it was different because I was treated, I think, like a girl in a lot of ways. I was not allowed to do things that my brothers did. So it was great to hear how someone was able to be treated with a different type of childhood in that way. But we were very poor when I was growing up. We had child services come to inspect us and almost took us away, the way that she talks about in her book. But certainly having sexual abuse as well. She was sexually abused by a farmhand. I was sexually abused as well. So there are a lot of things that I really identified with. And I'm an aspiring mother. So the fact that she was able to overcome all this adversity, build a business, and be a mother, that was something that I really aspired to, and I really was able to relate to in that way. I love how she just didn't give up at the end of the day. And that's something that through all the challenges I've been through, I've really had to tell myself as well. What about you, Elizabeth?
So just like Sarah, I grew up in a very rural community. I mentioned this a little earlier in our book club discussion. And so I myself also, I mean, I've seen firsthand the struggles of farms to survive. I've seen farmers reinventing themselves, trying new crops in order to make ends meet. And I've also grown up with and been able to meet some really just fantastic, hardworking people. The mentality every time I return to my childhood home of the people who live and work in these communities day in, day out is like nothing you can find anywhere else. They're the most inspiring people. And so I think I relate to her. I relate to her in that way. But we do have someone actually who wants to come and join us up on stage to talk about the book and to ask a question. Her name is also Elizabeth, Elizabeth T. Are we able to bring Elizabeth up on the stage? And we'll see what she wants to talk to us about. I think Elizabeth is getting ready to come up.
In the meantime, do you want to give the names of our winners?
I would love to. You guys have been waiting long enough, right? I'm so excited to share with you the 3 winners of a signed copy of Sarah's book. Our first winner is Barb B. Craft. Congratulations, Barb. One of our team members will be in touch with you.
Hey, Barb.
Our second winner is Linda Sykes. Congrats, Linda. And our final winner is Frances Liu. I think I said that correctly, Frances. So congratulations to all 3 of you. One of our team members will be getting in touch and we will get your books out to you in the mail.
Great. Congratulations, ladies. Lynn, Barb, and Linda. We love it.
All right. So I don't think we can get Elizabeth up on stage to join us after all. That's okay. We are all used to technical difficulties at the end of the day. So Carrie, let's go ahead and bring this one home. Anything else that you want to talk about while we are here about the book before we wrap?
No, I mean, I'm just so grateful for everyone who's participated today and for those 3 ladies who got their signed copy. If you already got another copy, you can give that one to a friend, but definitely encourage everyone to read the book. It's a nice little shot in the arm of some optimism during this time when so many of us have been through some really big challenges.
Absolutely. Well, as Carrie said, thank you all for joining us for this month's IWF Reads Book Club. We certainly hope you enjoyed the book and our discussion. If you have any feedback, please do send us a note in our Facebook group or shoot us an email at info@iwf.org. We always love to hear from you. And make sure you check back on IWF because we actually have a fabulous Champion Women profile about Sarah coming out very, very soon. Before we sign off, Carrie, I'm going to turn it back over to you to tell our viewers a little bit about Independent Women's Forum.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I also want everyone who's here today, make sure you sign up for the next author chat that we have here at IWF. It's Jordan Peterson, the rock star in a 3-piece suit, what I like to call him. He's the author of the newly released Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. And we're going to have a chat with him here on July 22nd with our chairman, Heather Higgins. It's going to be amazing. You do not want to miss this one. So make sure you sign up for that. But more broadly, looking at what IWF is, the Independent Women's Forum, seeing so many great names on our chat and in our list. Some of you are all new names, and we're so excited to have you join our community. We are dedicated to developing and advancing policies that aren't just well-intended, but actually enhance people's freedoms, choices, and their well-being. We would love to have you more involved with IWF, so please visit our website. It's iwf.org, and you can sign up to receive the latest updates and events from IWF. My colleague just shared the link in the chat there, and be sure to follow us on social media as well, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we would love to welcome you all the time. We've got so much going on in the news cycle. There's so many things that we're doing to promote freedom. And with that, it is time for us to say goodbye. And we thank you so much all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. And from all of us at Independent Women's Forum, thank you for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.